Now, the MCU has been around for quite some time, but Spider seems like more of an OG superhero. There are only a couple comic book characters that actually have more movies than him at this point, so it's no surprise we've seen a lot of villains on screen. Of course, some just end up being just a name, but others definitely stood out. Now, I do think some background villains like Scorpion or even Chameleon deserve much more screen time, but technically they have already been cast in the MCU, so unfortunately they will be off this list. But still, there are even more Spider-Man villains out there that deserve a shot on screen. Sure, they may not be some of the best known, and some might be better as a secondary villain, but I'd really like to see them on screen at some point. But before we get started, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Surfshark. Surfshark is a VPN that allows you to protect your data from being breached, which is great, but I mainly use it to change my IP address to make it seem like I'm from different countries. Like if you live in the US and you were looking to watch every Spider-Man movie and prep for No Way Home, well, you simply couldn't do so. Or you could get Surfshark and simply just change your IP address to be in South Korea. Then you've got all 3 Spider-Mans in one home. Even without changing your IP address, it just makes sense in today's age to protect your data. And Surfshark actually allows you unlimited devices. So you use promo code BrianSeeker and get 83% off, as well as an extra 3 months free with the service. So check out the description below for more details. So today we're going to look at those who could don new roles within the Spider-Man universe. So instead of recasting, we're just casting. Today we're going to tackle Jackal, Tombstone, Mr. Negative, Morlun, and Hammerhead. So let's recast Spider-Man. First up, we have Mr. Negative, someone who seems like they can naturally be infused in the current MCU and actually really do something really interesting. Now, I think it would be intriguing to see that full journey of this character from a Chinese gang into someone who's more of a Jackal and Hyde. I think there's something worthwhile here, especially with the look of this character and his gang of the inner demons. Now, Mr. Negative, it's important we have someone who has that dominating performance, but almost that style where it almost seems effortless. I do want someone who has a martial arts background as well, because I want someone who can seem like they can hold their own in a fight sequence, and someone who can really translate the power that Mr. Negative has. That's why I went with Daniel Wu, who is best known from Into the Badlands. I think he's got that mob boss type feel, but also is someone that can just put you in your place. He's got the intensity needed for this kind of role, and is definitely a badass. I can see him playing this role with that certainty and that precision that this character needs.
Nomads ambushed a transporter a couple miles back. Killed all the cogs, except one.
So Daniel Wu is Mr. Negative. Next up, let's tackle Tombstone. Now, Tombstone is one of those characters that I feel would be better supported as an enforcer or a secondary villain. Maybe it's just me, but I can see him more in that role. Now, I want to lean into a little bit of that design of the PS4 Spider-Man and go a little bit more realistic with it. Now, this one actually breaks my rule just a little bit because Marvin Jones III has actually voiced Tombstone in the past. He had a very, very small role in Into the Spider-Verse.
You messed up big time, kid. Very sloppy.
But in a role like this, he is beyond perfect. He has that perfect mix that is comic book accurate, but definitely updating him and grounding him for the current MCU. Plus, Marvin just has that presence and that voice.
Screw up, and I'll rip that spinal implant out and shove it down your throat.
It's hard to deny how well he'd work here. So Marvin Jones III as Tombstone. Up next, let's tackle Morlun. Now, Morlun actually may fit in the MCU a lot better than Morbius ever could. And now that Morbius is actually getting his own spin-off film, this is more likely of a possibility. Now, I always just looked at Morlun as just an old-time version of Morbius, but he's much more than that. Now, he does have that vampiric-type villain nature, but he's actually more well known for hunting down the spider totems and attempting to kill all versions of Spider-Man. Now, I remember thinking before he was cast as Doctor Strange, Benedict Cumberbatch would be great here, especially channeling his time as Khan. But of course that just will never happen now, so we have to look at another actor with a similar type of vibe. Now, one actor who definitely hasn't had their shot in a big franchise yet, and I feel like is really due for one, is Tom Ellis. He has that unsettling nature that we see in Lucifer, but still having a lot of personality shining through.
Hello? Can't believe we've met. Lucifer, Morningstar.
Lucifer, Morningstar, as in...
The devil, yes, exactly. So tell me, what is it you desire?
I can see him taking over the darker side of this role, but still staying true to the character. So Tom Ellis as Morlun. Next up, we have Hammerhead. Much like Tombstone, I think this role is much better supported as an enforcer, or someone similar to the Shocker within Homecoming. Much like the comics, I do want him to have a skull enforced with steel and not shy away from that, but not over-explain it as well. All we need to do is have a shot of Spider-Man punching him in the head, and Spider-Man just hurting himself. I do like the idea of Hammerhead just being that enforcer and just having one great fight scene with Spider-Man, and Spider-Man having to use his creativity to beat him. Now, because of this, I think that little dialogue is required, and we need more of a stuntman and someone who can do that heavy lifting within a fight scene. I went with Anthony Molinari, who is best known for his stunt work, as well as being the stunt double for Mark Ruffalo, but with a scarred up, massive forehead, you can see him definitely translating well into this character. He does have an acting background as well.
I plan on moving right through Mickey Ward tomorrow. Moving on to other great fighters like Gotti. Yeah, I believe Gotti and I'd make a great match.
I'm pretty much casting him for the look, as well as what he can do in a fight scene.
No hard feelings, okay?
So Anthony Molinari as Hammerhead. Lastly, we have the Jackal, the genetic scientist who has an unhealthy obsession with Gwen Stacy, and after her death, creates his alter ego, seeking revenge on Spider-Man. Of course, this would have worked a lot better within Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man and a potential Amazing Spider-Man 3, so of course we have to update his story a little bit. But still, we need that essence of a brilliant scientist with that little bit of an unsettling nature to him. I don't think the obsession would translate well to MJ, but I think with Tom Holland going to university eventually, and definitely studying under his wing would work incredibly well. Wherever you bring this character, I think Vincent Cassel is a perfect choice here. He definitely has that underlying creepiness to him, and if you want to lean into him being obsessive, he can definitely pull that off.
I was only guessing the White Swan should be yours. But I'm not. Maestro, audio scotta, please. Now show me your Black Swan, Nina.
He also has just this unexplainable vibe to him that definitely comes across in every single time he appears on screen. You know something's boiling under the surface with him, and I think that worked well into the buildup of this villain, but also the payoff of becoming that villain. I think it'd be really interesting here. So Vincent Cassel as the Jackal. So there are my Spider-Man villains who haven't been seen on screen before. Let me know your choices in the comments below, as well as let me know what you'd like to see in the next episode. Do you want to see the characters that I missed in Into the Spider-Verse? Or something else Spider-Man related, or should I just move on? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.